2017 was a very strange and unique year for the iPhone. It's the only time we've ever seen a new iPhone get unveiled and then look completely outdated just minutes later. And that's because the iPhone X was announced just after the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, and almost all of the attention went to that futuristic phone without a home button. And since then, every iPhone sold by Apple has had that same full screen display with no home button, aside from the iPhone SE. But some people have always had a home button. It's what they're used to, and they don't want to give it up. And that's where the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus come in. And while these phones have been great for many years now, are they still worth buying here in 2022? And if you have one now, should you just bite the bullet and upgrade, or will it still last a couple more years? Let's discuss. Let's start with the design, because this is perhaps the #1 factor when deciding whether or not you want to use the iPhone 8 Plus in 2022. So the 8 Plus was the first iPhone to have a glass back and allow for wireless charging, but it didn't really change much aside from that. We still have the same big bezels that we saw on the iPhone 7 series. We have the aluminum frame and that same IP67 dust and water resistance. It was on the heavier side back in 2017, weighing just over 200 grams, but compared to today's iPhones, it's really not that heavy. And of course, we cannot talk about the design of this phone without mentioning the star of the show, and that is the home button and Touch ID. And you would be surprised at the amount of people who still to this day prefer Touch ID over Face ID, and you might very well be one of them if you're watching this video. And it's easy to see why. I mean, it's fast, you don't have to look at your phone to unlock it, you could just be unlocking it as you're pulling it out of your pocket, and it's just simply familiar to a lot of people. And here in 2022, Touch ID is a nice breath of fresh air. I mean, I've been using Face ID devices for so long that I tend to forget about Touch ID and how awesome it is. It's very convenient, it's very fast. I'm running iOS 15 here on this iPhone 8 Plus, and it seems to be faster than what I remember back in like the iOS 13 days. So really solid here. I do really like Touch ID. I think I still prefer Face ID, especially now that you can unlock your phone even with a mask on using Face ID. But still, Touch ID is awesome, and if that's what you're familiar with and what you like, you're going to love it here on the 8 Plus. Now, as for the durability over time, the iPhone 8 Plus has actually held up pretty well for me. I've been using it for the past week or so without a case or a screen protector, which is not recommended, especially with this fragile back glass. It's not as strong as the back glass we have on newer iPhones, so that is something to keep in mind. If you are going to get one and use it without a case, make sure you don't drop it because it will shatter pretty easily. But after using it here, just recently, I have not noticed really any scratches at all on the front display. Some minor micro scratches, but that's it. And a little nick here from when I did drop it on its side, but nothing too major. So durability, it's done pretty well over the past couple of years, and especially here lately, I've not really had any issues with durability. Now, the display is definitely one of the weaker points of the iPhone 8 Plus in 2022, but it's mainly because of kind of where we've advanced to and what we have nowadays, which is OLED and really advanced LCD panels. But on this guy, we have a 5.5-inch 1080p screen. It's exactly 1920 by 1080. So your 1080p YouTube videos are going to fit to size, perfectly. But, that's pretty much it. I mean, this was the first phone to get True Tone, so that is a nice addition, but it pretty much ends there. The screen, it's not really anything that's going to blow you away like the iPhone X did at launch, or even like the iPhone XR did with its Liquid Retina LCD display. So this is just an average LCD panel that you'd expect from a 2017 phone. And going back to the 8 Plus after using my iPhone 13 Pro, obviously I saw a major difference in the quality of videos, the color, and the clarity of text while web browsing in Safari. But as I always say, this is only going to be a big deal to you if you are already used to a better display. And if you're spending $200 on an iPhone, the quality of this display is not going to be a deal breaker. And it definitely will not be a deal breaker when you realize that the 8 Plus still has a pressure sensitive screen, which means you still have 3D touch. Now, this feature, of course, was replaced with haptic touch back in 2019, but we all know 3D touch was far better, and this phone will always have that pressure-sensitive screen and 3D touch. So, of course, if you haptic press right here, you will see it pulls up the quick menu right there, and it just feels so much better here on a pressure-sensitive screen. Of course, you can use little pressure and it will bring up the menu, but if you haptic press, you can see it pulls it up faster. It actually still works here in 2022 on iOS 15. And I love 3D Touch. And believe it or not, I think the iPhone 8 Plus is performing better than ever here in 2022. So with iOS 15, we got further optimization of the older iPhones. Apple is always looking to further optimize the older iPhones, which I really appreciate. And I was really impressed by how well this device performed with pretty much everything I threw at it. I mean, inside we have the A11 Bionic chip. And when I used this phone for the past week, I really didn't find myself doing anything too strenuous. I didn't really play a ton of games, like advanced games. I didn't really export any videos or anything like that, or video edit. It was mainly just social media browsing. I did some web browsing in Safari, texting, calling. I did pull out my phone to take some pictures, every now and then. But, when doing those tasks that I mentioned, I really didn't have any major issues. And this phone was faster and more efficient than I expected, or really even faster than I remember. Now, I did have some stutter when multitasking, and sometimes the phone would just hang when I tapped to open up an application. But for a 2017 device, I'm impressed by the performance so many years later. And speaking of speed, if you've ever wanted to create a graphic but don't have the time to learn Photoshop, today's sponsor Canva is here to make that creative process so much faster. Canva is an online design platform that is essential if you want to design pretty much anything. I've used Canva for several years to create thumbnails, business cards, invoices, presentations, and much more. They have a massive amount of templates that are super easy to customize, since everything is just a simple drag and drop. You just upload your logos, your assets, whatever you have, and it's all plug and play from there. This platform is the only free one I've ever used that allows you to create really professional looking graphics without needing to spend months or years learning graphic design. So yes, Canva is free, but they also have a pro version that gets you access to the really professional templates, some more stock photos, music, premium tools, and much more. It also makes a lot of sense if you have a team, as you can collaborate with up to 4 other team members in real time while creating graphics for a project. So if you want to test out the pro version of Canva for 45 days, completely free of charge, click the link down in the description below. This is going to be your best way to try out Canva and the infinite possibilities it brings. And big shout out to Canva for sponsoring this segment of the video. Now moving on to the battery life, this is an area where it's just too hard not to compare to other phones. Now, yes, performance and camera quality are important, but everyone's vision of good performance or good camera quality is different. With battery life, there's no real distinction. Either it lasts long or it doesn't. And when we see that the newer iPhones get all-day battery life while we can barely get 5 hours on the 8 Plus, it makes you want something better. Now, granted, my 8 Plus does only have 92% battery capacity, so if you do have a less worn battery, if you have a newer battery inside, you could get better results, but don't expect it to get through a full day. Expect to have, mobile chargers on deck. And then finally, let's discuss the cameras. So we have a dual 12 megapixel camera setup, one wide angle and one telephoto lens. And overall, I'd say that the photos are average. I mean, nothing taken with this camera is going to wow you, but it's also not going to disappoint if you're in good lighting. But that's the key, good lighting, because this camera is not good in low light situations. It also really struggles with dynamic range. Like, I noticed that the sky will be blown out in almost every shot I take outdoors, which is pretty annoying. Even indoors sometimes, it just really struggles with that dynamic range. We do have auto HDR, true tone flash, and OIS, so some of these standard features are there, but using this camera here in 2022 made me realize how big of a difference things like Smart HDR and Deep Fusion make with that post-image processing. And thanks to that telephoto lens, we do get portrait mode with portrait lighting, and it actually works pretty well on both people and objects. The edges are not perfect, they're not quite as precise as the cameras of today, but it does get the job done. Just keep in mind, I did notice more grain when taking portrait photos in lower lit situations. But overall, photo quality is fine, especially if you only take casual photos, but just keep in mind, it's nothing to write home about. Just make sure you have good lighting and don't have your expectations super high, especially compared to what's out there right now. And then as far as the front-facing camera goes, it's just simply not good. I mean, we have a 7 megapixel f2.2 camera that can only shoot up to 1080p. So for FaceTime, it's fine, I guess, but selfies, and especially selfie videos, are gonna turn out looking like they were shot in 2017. So you also don't get any of the fun features like portrait mode, Animoji, Memoji, or night mode. So the front facing camera is extremely limited. And then as for the video, we can shoot up to 4K 60 on the rear cameras, and video actually doesn't look too bad. But the big downside is that we don't get stereo recording, just a very flat mono sound. So if you take a video and you listen to it, especially with headphones on, you will be able to hear that the audio is not very good. But still, the video quality itself is going to be fine for most people who are not looking to have, the best quality out there. It's going to be just fine. Now, with all that being said, should you still buy the iPhone 8 Plus in 2022? And if you have one now, should you consider upgrading this year and selling your iPhone 8 Plus? So first off, of course, you cannot buy this phone new from Apple anymore, so you're going to be looking at Amazon or eBay for used and refurbished models. And looking at eBay, which is where I would personally recommend buying used iPhones from, you can see that these are going anywhere from $150 to $230 in mint condition. You can find 128 and 256 gigabyte models for about the same price actually as the 64 gigabyte model. So I would definitely recommend going with either 128 or 256. Even if you don't think you're going to use all that storage, you definitely need that if you want to have the phone for any extended amount of time. So to me, with that price point in mind, I think the iPhone XR is the better buy in that price range. I would only recommend the 8 Plus over something like the iPhone XR if you just want that old iPhone style design with the big, bezels up top and bottom. If you want that home button, of course, that is a reason to get the 8 Plus. This is the last, quote unquote, big iPhone with a home button. So if that's specifically what you want, go for it. I just think the iPhone XR makes a lot more sense when we're talking about a phone under $250. And keep in mind, the new iPhone SE is also coming out in 2022. So if you want to retain that home button, but get better performance and better battery life, the iPhone SE is definitely worth looking at. Now, if you currently have an iPhone 8 Plus, should you upgrade in 2022? And my answer to that would be yes, actually. I think it is probably time to upgrade your 8 or 8 Plus. Maybe not right away, but by the end of this year, I personally would. And the reason for this is because iOS 16 will likely support the iPhone 8 Plus. You probably will get iOS 16 on this device, but it might be one of the final software versions compatible with this phone. Plus, if you sell this now for over $200, that gives you a decent amount of equity into your next iPhone, which would likely be a huge upgrade over the 8 Plus, especially if it's the new SE. So $200 can get you halfway to the price of a brand new 2022 iPhone. I would definitely do that if I were you. But let me know what you guys think. If you agree or disagree, let me know in a comment down below. I love hearing your opinions on these older iPhones here in the year 2022. And of course, if you have an iPhone 8 Plus right now, let me know your thoughts on that down there in those comments below. But if you guys enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. And of course, make sure to subscribe for a lot more iPhone coverage coming later this year. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.